And we're back, like we never left. This is episode 133 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining me here on this Wednesday evening in New York. If you're checking out this episode on the YouTube channel or enjoying the content, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. So I didn't realize immediately upon waking today, it's Quentin Tarantino's birthday. The master filmmaker, who is a brilliant writer, turned 61 today. And he's made 9 films, if we put the Kill Bill movies twice, meaning Kill Bill Volume 1, Kill Bill Volume 2. It was always intended to just be one movie, but can't really release a 4-hour film unless you're Eric von Stroheim in 1921, but that's a whole other story. But Quentin Tarantino is getting set to make what he says is going to be his 10th and final film, and there's certainly been a lot of, not really controversy, but a lot of chatter. Is he serious? Is he really going to retire? Has he actually had enough? Does he feel like he's said enough? Is he just worried that he doesn't want to hang on too long? Who knows? But I have been a fan of Quentin Tarantino. I don't want to say from the beginning, because I didn't see Reservoir Dogs right away. Reservoir Dogs famously premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in the, I want to say the early part of 1992 or late 91. I don't know the exact date. But there was no internet, no computer hookup. You didn't have the same flow of information. I didn't know that movie caused a sensation at that year's Sundance Film Festival. I'm not sure that I heard of Quentin Tarantino until 1994. And I only heard of him because Reservoir Dogs was released to video. But I didn't see it. I don't remember reading a review in Newsday or the Daily News or any of the papers. I was not somebody who latched onto him immediately. Nowadays, with the internet, with social media, with things going viral, I no doubt would have become aware of Quentin Tarantino as soon as Reservoir Dogs screened at the Sundance Film Festival and people went berserk. But again, different time, judgment-free zone over here. I mean, you could judge me for not hopping on immediately, but it was more difficult then. I would have had to subscribe to different movie magazines because Entertainment Weekly wasn't really covering that sort of stuff, and neither was Premiere Magazine. I heard of Quentin Tarantino by 1993, but I did not see Reservoir Dogs until starting New York University Film School in the fall of 1994. And a classmate, well, there were 2 classmates who had seen the movie. One, this guy, Ian Lyman, who was my first kind of good friend from New York University. And there was another guy whose name was Tim, but I can't remember his last name. But he had met Tarantino at a screening of Pulp Fiction. It's funny that actually was released my first semester at New York University Film School. Pulp Fiction opened in the United States. But he had seen Reservoir Dogs, and he said, no, you've got to see it. You've got to see it. I hadn't yet gone to see Pulp Fiction. It hadn't opened wide yet. It was in a couple of theaters in the city. My dad and I both wanted to see it. We knew that it had won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, famously. But I hadn't seen it yet, and I hadn't seen Reservoir Dogs. And my friend Ian, and then there was another guy who I was friends with, Steve Charbonneau, both of them from the Pacific Northwest, just one of those weird geographical quirks that they landed at New York University as freshmen in the fall of 94. I was a junior. I had transferred credits over. But they had both seen Reservoir Dogs on good old-fashioned VHS. That was the only game in town for most people. Some had Laserdisc, but Laserdisc never really caught on the way that it should have. I guess the platform was a little sloppier than it needed to be. They probably should have taken more time to get all the bugs out, but that's neither here nor there. Point is, these guys had seen the film on a VHS tape. Standard sound, normal TV. And they both, as this other guy Tim had, you have to see this movie. You sure as fuck shouldn't watch Pulp Fiction before seeing Reservoir Dogs. You've got to have some background. I'm telling you, you're not going to believe how good this movie is. So I normally didn't like being bullied into seeing films. I was a lot scrappier and edgier and naturally angrier and ready to be combative with people. But these guys were really nice, and I liked them, and I didn't want to get in anybody's face. Oh, fuck you, I'm not fucking seeing it. No, I'm really not going to see it. That was the kind of personality I was. But in this case, I said, you know what? It's available at the local Blockbuster. I was living in Woodbury at the time. There was a Blockbuster at the corner of Jericho Turnpike and South Oyster Bay Road. It's now doctor's offices. I think it's an urgent care. But anyway, it's right up the block. Okay, I'll rent it. I rented Reservoir Dogs, and not surprisingly, just as everyone predicted, it blew me away. What a fucking movie. Holy shit. And it's so good that as much as I love a huge chunk of Tarantino's work, I'll give you the movies that I consider to be masterpieces in my, well, I don't want to say non-professional opinion, but you know what I mean. Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained, Kill Bill 1, Kill Bill 2, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs. Each of those movies, for me, hits the masterpiece button. Hateful Eight is good. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, very good. But those movies that I mentioned are all, to me, masterpieces. And where I was going with that, not to just throw names of movies at you, that many of you have seen them all. If somebody says to me, I still maintain that Reservoir Dogs is Tarantino's best film, that's how good it is. Because I put Pulp Fiction, for me, Pulp Fiction and Kill Bill, which I take as one movie, because it was always intended to be one 4-hour movie or whatever it would have been. I put them on equal footing. That is how big a fan I am of the Kill Bill movies or just Kill Bill. They are to me as good as anything he's done. And there are some people that just they didn't work for them, they didn't understand the samurai, all of that shit, because Tarantino has his certain obsessions that go into his movies, and that's deliberate. You know what you love, and there are certain TV shows, whether it was Hawaii Five-0, he used a lot of the music, certain camera angles. He loved the samurai films, Akira Kurosawa, one of his filmmaking heroes, in addition to Sergio Leone, whereas the second half of Kill Bill has elements of the spaghetti western. This is not an accident or a coincidence. But I became a fan of Quentin Tarantino the first time I watched Reservoir Dogs on not a terrible TV, it was like a 20-inch TV at the old apartment that my dad had in Woodbury once upon a time. And he then saw it, he loved it. And that was why we were both excited. Hey, Pulp Fiction is going to be, it's opening at the Comac Multiplex, Friday, whatever it was. But it was soon that we were going to be able to see the movie for ourselves. And it was good that we had both watched Reservoir Dogs. Needless to say, we were blown away by Pulp Fiction. And it's not by accident that I got this poster not long after that movie came out and made such an incredible splash. Not just in Hollywood and not just for movie fans. It is a cultural touchstone. It is that big of a deal. In the still largely pre-internet age of 94, 95, where I knew plenty of people that, in school that were dialed up. The internet was very slow. It was very slow. It's nothing like now. Even though you could communicate and the Internet Movie Database existed, I remember people showing it to me. I didn't get on the internet for at least another year and a half. But the idea is, this was a prodigious talent who was given an opportunity, and I told the story, and I'll just briefly recap, of how Quentin Tarantino actually got his big break. Because he didn't go the film school route like many of the masters from the prior generations, whether it was Lucas or Coppola or Brian De Palma, who went to Columbia, or Martin Scorsese, who at least went through the angle of school and maybe making connections from there. Quentin Tarantino was just a brilliant kid who worked at a video store, was famous for recommending obscure movies to people, and people always loved the movies that he recommended. We know he's kind of an out there guy. IQ is presumably off the charts, but he has good taste when it comes to movies. He doesn't randomly like things And he jokes around with certain filmmakers you expect him not to like, that he ends up liking. He doesn't love Hitchcock and Kubrick as much as you think that he would. He felt they were both limited by the system, which was unfortunate. He would have loved to have seen Hitchcock be able to work without restrictions and not worry about ratings or not being shown nudity or sex or whatever. But that's beside the point. Briefly, Tarantino's big break was he took an acting class. We know he's not a great actor, but he took an acting class that was taught by Harvey Keitel's wife. I know that's so wacky, but he taught an acting class that was taught by Harvey Keitel's wife, specifically in the hope and prayer that he would be able to get a screenplay that he had written. He would impress her enough or show enough to her that she felt, well, this kid is he's very intelligent and maybe he can write. He took the class in the hope that he could give his screenplay for what became Reservoir Dogs. By the way, if you ever wondered why he came up with the title of Reservoir Dogs, Louis Malle, famous French filmmaker, married to Candice Bergen, the actress. Louis Malle made a movie in the 80s called Au revoir les enfants. And Quentin Tarantino loved that movie, and he had trouble remembering the name. And he always just referred to it as that Reservoir Dogs movie. I'd like a good foreign film. Oh, grab that Reservoir Dogs movie from the shelf for Miss Kent. That Reservoir Dogs movie. So when he made his movie, he called it Reservoir Dogs. So I don't know if Reservoir Dogs was the title of the script at this juncture. But he takes the acting class. He's a terrible actor, but his enthusiasm and his limitless knowledge of Hollywood, its history, movies around the world, the trivia that he knew. Harvey's wife was very impressed. And he then felt comfortable saying, I wrote a script. I know you're going to get upset at me, or Harvey, maybe he won't do it. But if you would take a look at it, I think it's good. Maybe you could show it to your husband, maybe? She said, of course. So very long story and twisted story, very short. She gave the script to her husband, Harvey Keitel, who was dazzled, thought it was the best screenplay he'd ever written. This was a guy who was made Taxi Driver. He thought that Reservoir Dogs knocked him flat, was groundbreaking shit. He couldn't believe what he was reading. Who the fuck is this kid? That's what got the ball rolling. Again, there's many intricate components as to how Reservoir Dogs even got made, but that was the inciting incident, to use a movie term. So Tarantino, that's how he got rid of Reservoir Dogs. That's how his career got going. And the extraordinary success of Pulp Fiction, which became a box office hit and sold a shit ton of copies on VHS. And then business for Reservoir Dogs, the VHS, picked up. And more people saw that movie. Again, in that time, everything was different. Shawshank Redemption bombing in theaters the same year, the same Oscars, where Tarantino only won the screenplay Oscar with his writing partner at the time, Roger Avery, another guy who was a genius in his way. But Shawshank bombed, unlike Forrest Gump, the big winner at the Oscars of '95, and Pulp Fiction, which ended up turning a significant profit. Shawshank bombed, but it started to get the audience during the pre-Oscars re-release. Imagine having those three big movies, Shawshank Redemption, Forrest Gump, Pulp Fiction, all in theaters at the same time. I mean, that's some tough fucking choices if you're going to the movies and you haven't seen any of them and your friends have been raving about all three, which is not really that far-fetched. It's not that far-fetched. But Pulp Fiction was this enormous success. And I remember when Jackie Brown came out, I was disappointed. And it has its defenders. And see, this is one of the pitfalls of being so damn good, so smart, so talented, and such a great writer. And with such an incredible eye, for someone who didn't really receive formal training for this, as far as I know, he was just somebody there are just some people that are meant to do certain things. Steven Spielberg was meant to be a filmmaker. Quentin Tarantino was meant to be a filmmaker also. And when I say I don't like Jackie Brown, it's a good movie. Don't get me wrong. It's a good movie, and I would recommend it to anybody. But I've always felt that it's his least compelling film, despite the performances being very, very strong. And it's one of Samuel Jackson's signature roles, his speech about the AK-47, when you absolutely, positively have to kill every motherfucker in the room, accept no substitutes. I mean, that's absolute gold there. And Robert Forster, a kind of culty actor from the 60s who was in a movie I saw in film school, Medium Cool. Tarantino loved to do this. And this is, to his credit, this is not a criticism. He loved Robert Forster in movies like Medium Cool, so he wanted to work with him in Jackie Brown. He was a huge fan of Pam Grier in movies like Coffee, the so-called blaxploitation films of the 70s. Actors like Robert Hooks, who did Trouble Man. He loved Pam Grier. And Pam Grier actually recently had worked with John Carpenter in Escape from LA, so it's not like she was completely off the radar. Robert Forster had been working, but he was more off the radar than Pam Grier. But the idea was he wanted to work with these people who he grew up as fans of, and he had the opportunity to do so. I don't think the issue is either of them. The issue is the story just doesn't click for me the way it's supposed to. As much as Samuel Jackson is fucking hysterical, and an early role for Chris Tucker. He's a guy who always cut both ways for me. There are stretches in Rush Hour where I just want him to stop carrying on. I loved him in Jackie Brown. Beaumont. Who's Beaumont? He's an associate I had to let go. Chris Tucker scenes with Samuel Jackson, which is great. But that's a movie, Jackie Brown, that has these bursts of violence that Tarantino was already famous for. I saw both Kill Bill, the saga. They released Kill Bill Part 1 in theaters, and I saw it, and I absolutely loved it. And then I saw Part 2 the following summer when it came out, and I absolutely loved that too. I think both are just incredible. And I assume that there are methods on the internet, I'm sure there was a DVD where you had like all 4 hours or whatever. But I don't know if Tarantino did he sequence them? Like if you say you're going to watch the whole saga in one shot, is there a 4 hours and how did they arrange it? See, that I don't know. That sort of stuff, I'm always interested in so-called director's cuts and different versions. I can give you chapter and verse on the various iterations of Blade Runner, of Terminator 2, of Aliens, of James Cameron's The Abyss. James Cameron was always a guy who made longer movies, and his preferred cuts were often too long for the studios. And Barry Diller, famously at Fox, loved James Cameron's final cut of The Abyss, but he said, Jimmy, we can't release it, it's just too long. And then they had to cut it down to 2 hours and 15 minutes, and that version of that movie's not that good. And whereas the original full cut is fucking masterpiece. But I thought both Kill Bills were extraordinary. And the thing with Tarantino, he has two moments in his career. It's hard to explain this, and I'm going to lose some of you with this explanation. But there are moments for me in movies where something happens that is so unexpected and so thrilling to my cinematic sensibilities that I am in awe, that I am dazzled by what I'm seeing. The ending of The Truman Show is one of those moments where I always get chills. The moment in Aliens, James Cameron's Aliens, when Ripley is fighting the Queen and she's in the power loader. It's not the fight, but it's the moment when the alien has that like extra mouth and tries to attack Ripley. For whatever reason, that's the moment that gets me in that movie. I could not believe that this fucking alien, no matter what you do, it keeps coming. It has infinite ways to kill humans. Well, Quentin Tarantino produced two of those moments for me. The first one is the moment in Pulp Fiction where we realize that Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta are sitting in the same coffee shop that gets boosted by Honey Bunny, by Tim Roth and Amanda Plummer's characters. And in fact, if you go back and watch the movie, knowing this, you literally see John Travolta going to the bathroom in that opening segment. I'll execute every one of you motherfuckers. That unbelievable line reading by Amanda Plummer. I'll execute every single one of you motherfuckers. That's a moment of pure genius from Tarantino when we realize, holy shit, this is the same coffee shop. Wow. The other Tarantino moment that to me is otherworldly, and I believe it's why it elevates Kill Bill to the exalted level of Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. That whole extended sequence of Uma Thurman training with Pai Mei and the seemingly random obsession of you need to be able to attack an opponent no more than 6 inches in front of your face. You need to learn how to deliver lethal strikes from short range. Now that sounds great in general. You might be in a fight where you're at close quarters and have to it's great, it's fine. We see it in boxing, we see it in MMA. Muhammad Ali, 1965, delivered what amounted to a karate chop and nearly took Sonny Liston's head off, unless you think the fight was fixed, maybe it was. But that was a shot from short range that the guy didn't wind up. This was not a home run bomb. It was a quick corkscrew of a shot, delivered quickly and at a short range. It was not a big wind up of a strike. You need to be able to disable your attacker from very short range. And I'm wondering, what the fuck does this have to do with anything? Like, I didn't understand the first time watching Kill Bill Volume 2. What are we doing here? Who cares about Pai Mei? But then, The Lonely Death of Paula Schultz? I forgot if that was the name of the segment. But it was definitely Paula Schultz was the grave. Spoiler alert, Michael Madsen shockingly, stunningly gets the drop on the bride, Uma Thurman's main character who carries us through the entire complete Kill Bill saga. He gets the drop on her and he buries her alive. You know, like Star Trek II, buried alive, gone! He buries her alive. And as she is there in the coffin, all of a sudden, now you realize, okay, Pai Mei, here I come. If he had not taught her, if Pai Mei had not taught her this, because she's a lethal fighter, she's able to disable or kill anybody without being able to do that. But if he hadn't given her the instruction to attack from 6 inches in front of a target, she's going to run out of air and she's going to die a lonely death and a horrendous death. But because of her training, all right, Pai Mei, here I come. And that is one of the greatest moments in any movie ever made. That's a hill I'll go down on. Uma Thurman escaping from that graveyard, that grave, that coffin, because of the training of her cruel tutelage, the cruel tutelage of Pai Mei. But when I was in theaters and I realized what was happening, I got the same chill sensation as Pulp Fiction. Holy shit, this is the same coffee shop. Jim Carrey's final bow, to me still the most emotional moment of any movie ever. Big Jim's final bow at the end of The Truman Show. And Natasha McElhone racing out of her place, presumably to try to reconnect with Truman. But these are moments forever etched in time for me as a film fan. So I could take issue with, well, I didn't think the Jackie Brown was really that great. Hateful Eight was okay. It was very nasty. Didn't like Death Proof, that movie he did part of, Planet Terror with his buddy Robert Rodriguez. But there are moments like that for me. Moment in Chariots of Fire is another one when we realize at the end and we see the men running on the beach in the same fashion as they did 2 hours earlier at the beginning of the film, but we have a completely different understanding of that. That's one of those chill-inducing moments for me. But they're few and far between. Think about how many movies even the average film fan will see in half a century. It's rare that a film gets to you this deeply, that you are dazzled by the brilliance of its creators. Not just the filmmaker. Uma's performance is fucking incredible in Kill Bill. What Big Jim does in Truman Show, incredible. Sigourney Weaver's acting in Aliens. She does a lot of acting with fucking puppets. It's not that easy. As they say, well, it's difficult to act with green screen, that too. But she made me believe that alien was real. It's a fucking puppet. It's animatronics. It's Stan Winston stuff. brilliant, fantastic, but it's still acting opposite a puppet. And the fear on her face sells it. So Tarantino went on, and he always took time between projects. And like with many other filmmakers, there are ideas he had for projects that you wish had come off. He wanted to reboot Star Trek, make it an R-rated, like a sexier, dirtier Star Trek. I would have loved to have seen that. He talked about maybe getting involved with the James Bond franchise. Why not? That would have been incredible. He also, there were discussions, and I don't know, because again, he and Spielberg loves him. He and Spielberg had, I think, talked about ideas for Indiana Jones, for the one, what became Crystal Skull. I wish that he had gotten involved in that. But Tarantino is somebody who is a perfectionist and is not going to commit to a project unless he's 100% sure. And I like that. Not that I don't appreciate somebody banging out one movie after another, but the perfectionism, the wanting to make sure that the cast is just right and the shooting locations are exactly the way that we want. I have nothing but respect for that. Having said that, I would have loved to have seen Quentin take a crack at a James Bond film. Whatever he would have come up with, or even M. Night Shyamalan, who it was discussed that he may have been involved in what became Crystal Skull. They didn't use his ideas. I would have loved to have seen Quentin get behind the camera, the director's chair, or just write the screenplay for Spielberg to direct for the fourth Indiana Jones film. Anything but Crystal Skull. Sorry, I just don't like that movie. I just don't like, what can I say? I think it's terrible. I've watched it 3 or 4 times. I keep waiting for it to get better. No. And I love all the actors in it. It's just not good. But the idea is, even with the unrealized projects and some of the things that he talks about, I really wish I could have done that. Even someone as successful as him, he can't just snap his fingers and say, okay, I'm going to make a James Bond film, and here come, Albert Broccoli and his daughter Barbara. Let's go, Quentin. Let's make a movie. It's never that simple. But he supposedly is working on his final film, as we say, called The Movie Critic, and it's still shrouded in mystery other than the title, and maybe he'll end up changing the title. Who knows? But if he walks away, I hope that he walks away making another great movie. And I would say that, yes, Jackie Brown is the weakest film, for me, the weakest film of his career. But it's still worth seeing. I mean, there's levels of greatness. If you ask me what I think is the worst film that Steven Spielberg ever made, I think it's probably Jurassic Park Part 2, Lost World. It's still a good movie. Technically, it's amazing. Again, the blend of animatronics and CGI. Spielberg knows how to do it. But it's not that good. And Ready Player One, should have been better. Just wasn't that exciting. But it's still good. It's still a movie that if somebody says, hey, what's a kind of a quick, fun sci-fi? Yeah, Ready Player One, you'll enjoy it. It's good. But with so many great filmmakers doing exemplary work, much older than Quentin is now, and much older than he'll be a decade from now, you wonder, is he going to get restless? And after completing the Movie Critic, I think it's called The Movie Critic, or no, it's called The Film Critic, I'm sorry. Either way, I hope he does not actually retire. Because look at it this way. Clint Eastwood, who was the chairman of the jury at the 1994 Cannes Film Festival, who championed Pulp Fiction to get the Palme d'Or, the top prize. Clint Eastwood's career was thought to be on the downside and more or less, well, we're not in the Clint Eastwood business anymore. That was what Hollywood pretty much en masse. We're not in the Clint Eastwood business anymore. Clint Eastwood didn't make his comeback with Unforgiven until he was 62 and a half. Well, no, he was 62 and 3 months when Unforgiven hit. But more than a year older than Quentin Tarantino is now when he's saying, I'm only making one more film. Clint Eastwood now, 32 years after Unforgiven was wrapped, is still working. And he's made, many people would say he made his best films from age 62 onward. If you're just looking at films that he did as director. Francis Coppola's Megalopolis. Francis is 83 going on 84. And people can't wait for this movie. He's 83 going on 84. Even Spielberg, 77. Scorsese is, how old is Martin? Martin's 81, 82. I think De Palma's retired. But the idea is, Being 70, being 80, it doesn't necessarily mean what it used to. If you're in good health, if you keep exercising, keep moving, or if you're like Martin Scorsese, you have so much energy you can't sit still. And so, a happy 61st birthday to easily a top 10 greatest, well, certainly American filmmaker. Many would put him in the top 5, and I really can't quibble with that. Because he is every bit, to me, Quentin Tarantino is a peer of the masters. You want to say Wells and Kubrick, the two most influential? I won't take issue with that. Kubrick more so because his films are more easy to relate to for the current people. You know, people like Christopher Nolan literally grew up absorbing Stanley Kubrick movies and understanding, okay, this is how he achieved this shot, this is how he achieved this shot, this is how he achieved that shot. And matching music to images. Nobody did it better than Kubrick. But Tarantino is on par with anybody in terms of talent. The fact that he's such an incredible writer. If I'm asked a question, and I'm going to have to re-record this episode, who is the greatest Hollywood director who ever lived? If I'm asked the question, who is the greatest? Quentin is in the conversation. My favorite director of the masters probably would be either Spielberg or James Cameron. Probably. But Tarantino is right there. I love his Holy Trinity. For me, Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill. Even though Kill Bill is technically 2 movies, in this instance, I'm counting it as 1. Scorsese's Holy Trinity, Raging Bull, Goodfellas, Taxi Driver. I really only love Taxi Driver. The other movies I find uncomfortable to watch. And Francis Coppola, oddly enough, my favorite film of his is The Conversation, which is fucking mind-blowing. It's 50 years old. It's almost as old as me. It came out in 74. But Quentin holds his own with anybody who's ever worked in the movie business, as a writer, as a director. Most people are not great at both. He is great at both. And if somebody said, I think he's actually a better writer than he is a filmmaker, I don't agree with that, but it's at least arguable. He is not somebody who, well, he's a way better one than the other. He's equally gifted and equally a perfectionist in both, and he just makes the movies the way he wants to. And he's had a lot of funny interview moments where he talks back to the interviewer. Like, he's not going to sugarcoat anything. If he has something that he doesn't like, he's going to tell you. But if he has something that he does like, he's also going to tell you. And I guess that kind of honesty is still refreshing because he does come across as genuine when he's running down movies that, well, everybody loves this and I don't. Like, his favorite Indiana Jones film is Temple of Doom, for point of reference. And he hates that Spielberg has apologized for it. He says, Steven, I love it. Don't do that. You know, in their kind of funny way. But again, a happy 61st birthday to the extraordinary Quentin Tarantino, the writer-director behind mega classics such as Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill, Inglourious Basterds, Hateful Eight, Django Unchained, and somebody who was given an opportunity seemingly out of the blue, and he did more than capitalize. He exceeded anyone's expectations. Nobody could have ever predicted the success that he would have and the incredible output, the brilliance of his work. Happy birthday, Quentin. And with that, we've reached the end of episode 133 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you for joining me for this little Quentin Tarantino birthday retrospective. If you caught this on the YouTube channel, enjoyed the content, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, and turn on those notifications. Or if you caught this Quentin Tarantino retrospective on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 134 real soon. Until then, peace.